it is so difficult to deliver affordable housing. It is not worth the headache. The land is expensive. The cost of finance is high. Yet, if you go a little bit higher up the income bracket, there is still a big number of buyers and the margins are better. So that's the main reason why private developers have not been very attracted to go into affordable housing sector, because it's difficult to make money.
But not impossible.
If you to ask a teacher who earns 200,000 francs and expect them to live in an affordable rental in Kigali, they may be able to get it, but it may not be as decent as their job. Yeah, so that has been a bit of a mismatch. And the good news is government is setting up an entity that will be able to cover that gap.
There's a trend that I'm noticing, that rental property managers and owners, I'm seeing them really do two things that I think is very unfair. I'm seeing them increase rent almost at a haphazard level. Now they're also pricing everything in USD. You're starting to see people do that. And I know it's illegal.
You will find that, generally speaking, almost all business people, the way they will cushion themselves against inflation or rising prices will be either to mark up significantly or to dollarize whatever good or service that they are selling. You can get land as cheap as 1 million francs somewhere. So you can't go wrong with land. So the easiest, and I always tell people, the easiest way to step onto the property ladder is buy land.
If there was one message that people should take from this podcast, one message, one thing that they take away, what should that be?
Time to buy is yesterday.
This is the very, very best. I introduce the very, very next. Big deal. You know this is the big league. Unsanga mu mihanda ya Kigali, mega big fish. Word on the street turakaze. Habari gani mumeze mute. Dutse nshima Imana kuva nkunda mukiye. If you want the long form, come close murabure. Wait, what?
The long form.
What did he say?
The long form.
What?
The long form.
The long form. The long form. Hello there. My guest this week on the Long Form podcast is Charles Haba, Managing Director and founder of Century Real Estate, one of Rwanda's largest real estate companies. In this episode, we discuss the skyrocketing property prices, affordable housing, how to identify the right piece of property to purchase, the impact of foreigners in the Rwandan real estate market, and answer the question, is there a property bubble happening in Kigali right now? Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make a deal with you. About 69.5% of you who watched this very podcast haven't hit the subscribe button yet. So here's the deal I want to make with you. If you hit that subscribe button today, I promise you that my team and I will keep making the show better and better in every single way. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button today. And now let's get into the show. Mr. Charles Haba, welcome to the Long Form podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm happy to have you because, you know, when we think about being an adult, right? When you think about leaving boyhood to becoming a man or being a fully grown person, there's always the idea that you need to have a piece of land, a home to call your own. And, you know, it's one of those things that I guess it's an intrinsic human need, right? A roof over your head, piece of land to farm, land to invest in. So you're probably one of the most experienced real estate people, professionals in the country. You've worked on the banking side. In the banking side, you've also now kind of pushed into development, retail, rental. I think you're the right person to have these conversations with. And thank you for finding time.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
Yes. I'm going to start with the question that I think is the most important one when we talk about land and property and the future of it. You've been in the real estate game since about 2009 when you started Century. And that's about, 16 years? Right? First of all, congratulations. That's
Yeah, thank you. But probably in the space a little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 16 years of understanding the space. And you've probably been in Rwanda even longer. Now, one of the things that I do know about land prices and rental prices and the prices of homes and commercial space is they keep rising, they keep going up. They've never gone down. Listen, even in COVID, the prices held. And in fact, they probably increased around that time. I want to ask, as they say in Kinyarwanda, amahere is zabayahe. How high do you see our prices going? And are we in that famous thing where they talk about like property bubbles? Are we in a property bubble right now? And if we are, when do you see it bursting?
Thanks, Sunny. First of all, just to set the record straight, I've been I've been active or involved in the property, housing, and general real estate space for 22 years now.
Wow.
But that said, yesterday I saw a number from statistics released by the city of Kigali, putting the demand for housing at 183,000 units.
In Kigali?
In Kigali alone.
Jeez.
Now, 5 years ago, I think that because this is just a renewed survey, the 5 years ago, that number was at 34,000 units. But obviously, we understand that is a moving target because there are more people coming into Kigali city from areas that are rural. That is the first reason. The second reason is income levels increase. People leave school and start getting work. But the third reason is that some areas that were otherwise rural or semi-rural 5 years ago are no longer rural. They are connected to Kigali. If you just cross River Nyabarongo towards Ruyenzi or the other side towards the Eastern Province, those areas are they are literally connected to Kigali.
Kabuga used to, I remember when we were younger, when you were going to say Nyagatare,
yes,
you'd leave Kigali,
yes,
and then Kabuga would be the first town.
Yes.
Right? Remember that?
It was part of Chigaringari. Yes.
But now all of a sudden it's literally one space.
It's in Rusororo district. I mean Rusororo sector. So Gasabo district. So the point to answer the specific question about the bubble, because the supply is trying to catch up with an ever growing demand. We are not about to see that bubble anytime soon, in my prediction, because if you look at the supply that is coming on board, and if you just pick an indication from property developers only, when you looked at that number at the end of 2023, there were less than 1,000 units being done every year, trying to catch up with 34,000 needed every year. So that's not about, it's not about to burst or to catch up. However, there's a very, very important conversation that people need to understand all the time. And it is how you segment that demand or how you segment that supply, that ever growing demand is predominantly in the affordable and middle income housing sector. And sometimes these might sound like buzzwords, but they are very, very simplified in terms of either price range of a size or a size of a house or amount of rent that people can pay. So on specifically on the bubble side, it's not about to burst anytime soon, but it's important to look at it from the segment in which the supply is or the demand is, for that matter.
No, I think that issue of supply and demand is such an important conversation to have. I mean, we're seeing, like everywhere I turn, I'm kind of seeing these high-end properties just rising out of the ground. Whether it's in where we are right now in Nyarutarama, whether it's in Gachuriro, whether it seems like everything that's being built is for the haves, not necessarily the have-nots. And that's kind of, it's sad because you never really want to push people, out of that dream of owning, either owning a property or even being able to afford a property. I mean, you see, the Chinese are coming. They're building amazing properties. The Eritreans as well. I think Sudanese, but all of it is aiming for the same 5, maybe 3%. As you said, very, very little affordable housing. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the only one that I know of is maybe Buiza, Riversides. That's, I think, was being built by
A DHI.
I think they are from Sudan?
The American Somalis.
Yes. Now, you are, I mean, again, that's the demand supply, right? So you're seeing a few affordable homes. A lot, the builders like you, the developers are creating all these really nice apartments, which is great. But that leaves a huge sector of Rwandans without opportunities to buy a home or to be able to rent a property that they can actually afford. You are, again, as an expert, I would like to ask you why, if, when there's, I feel like there's this whole question of demand and supply. So the demand is there, right? There, you've said tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people need these homes, right? So the demand is there. Why simply isn't there a supply? What is the missing link there?
First of all, if you're to look at the supply and give an example of where we are. So it's very deceptive. If you live in Gachuriro and you work in Kachiro and you hang out in Nyarutarama and your kids go to Chibagabaga, you will be confined to observing the volume of real estate that is coming up in that area. When people look, and I just take the 3 to 5% figure that you mentioned, when people look at the bubble and they look at the supply, they may tend to arrive at a conclusion that there's an oversupply just because they have looked at what is coming up in those areas. All you need to do is move 5, maximum 10 kilometers out of those areas and you will see that there's no supply. Even if you move to an area like Bumbogo or Chinyinya, which is probably 2 kilometers away from where we are here in Nyarutarama, or you move to Nduba, or you move the other side to Masaka, Ndera, you'll actually see how you have bare looking hills that are yearning for development. So the point I'm trying to raise is, let's not be deceived by the supply that is coming on in the high income neighborhoods to think that there is an oversupply. That's point number one. Point number two, you raise a very, very pertinent question, that if we have all this huge demand in their tens of thousands of units, why is it that there's no supply coming on in that same?
Maybe, is it because there's no money in that segment of people? Like affordable housing, there's no money?
So that's partly, that's part of the reason. And you see, when you're delivering even just one house, your own house, anywhere you're going to live in, you'll need to buy that land, you'll need to buy the cement, the sand, and blah, 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 pay for the labor, eventually the finishing materials, the tiles, bathrooms, and all the sanitary wares, and until you can lock it. So if it's going to, all those are costs, and you will probably, if you have cash and savings, well and good, or if not, you're going to borrow money. So all those inputs that are required to deliver the house, if you're doing it as a business, it has to make money at the end of the day. If you have to go through all that process and struggle to sell that house to make money, you'll just not do it as a business. Right? Because if it's going to cost you 45 million francs to build a house, and the market is telling you to sell it at 46 million francs, you will just say, this is not worth the hassle. Let me not do this business. And that's the case of middle income housing versus or upper middle, upper high-end housing versus affordable housing. Is that it is so difficult to deliver affordable housing. It is not worth the headache. The land is expensive. The cost of finance is high. The costs of all the materials and the delivery is quite high. Yet, if you go a little bit higher up the income bracket, there is still a big number of buyers, and the margins are better. So that's the main reason why private developers have not been very attracted to go into affordable housing sector, because it's difficult to make money.
But not impossible.
And again, some of these things are usually, they flow organically. In some of our neighboring countries, we are seeing private developers go more into affordable housing sector, into the affordable housing sector, and that's because the middle income housing is getting saturated. In Kigali's case, because the middle income housing is not yet saturated, the middle and high is not yet saturated, then therefore you may as well continue feasting on that before you think about
carcass.
But let me also say something extremely important about the role of government and government related institutions in the delivery of affordable housing. Over the last few years, you've had initiatives around social housing schemes that are predominantly targeting people living in high-risk zones, flood, lowland areas, steep slopes. When it rains, their houses are swept away, lives are lost. And you've had schemes in Busanza, you've had schemes in back in the day, you had one in Batsinda, you've had more recent ones in Karama in their hundreds of units, and they serve a very good purpose. It's been predominantly social, and the good news is I think government has woken up to realize that if the private sector is not very thrilled or encouraged to be an active player in the affordable housing space, only government can step in. The good news is government, I'm privy to information that government is setting up an affordable housing scheme, and they are beginning with rental housing, because when we talk of affordability, Sunny, we don't only think about affordable to buy. We also talk about affordable to rent. So one of the challenges that the city has, especially this, is decent housing that is affordable to rent. If you to ask a teacher who earns 200,000 francs and expect them to live in an affordable rental in Kigali, they may be able to get it, but it may not be as decent as their job. Yeah, so that has been a bit of a mismatch. And the good news is government is setting up an entity that will be able to cover that gap, which is really exciting.
Tell me more about that. Because now you're giving me something that I've not actually heard about. Tell me more about that entity, as much as you can actually share.
I hope I can share as much, but I'll just share as much as I know. Is that different government entities, and this is, I think, an initiative of the Rwanda Housing Authority, Ministry of Infrastructure, are setting up. The thought process is to set up an SPV
SPV is a what?
Special purpose vehicle.
Okay.
That will predominantly be building affordable rental housing. What we've been having predominantly, historically, has been an entity. The entity in charge of housing for the government of Rwanda has been the Rwanda Housing Authority, but they are a policy maker and not necessarily a deliverer. So that has left a huge gap in terms who actually builds the houses. That has been a challenge. So that is being resolved by the establishment as and when it happens. I have been told it's something that's in its final stages of its offing, and that will be fantastic in terms of really covering that gap of the affordable rentals in the city of Kigali. However, just to park that on the side and talk about the challenges of affordability, if you just to pick 3 items, and that is land, infrastructure, and finance.
Yeah.
Land, to your earlier point about prices just continuing to shoot up and up, we don't have elasticity of land.
Yeah.
It's one of the most scarce resources most countries have. Rwanda being the biggest culprit of that because of our hilly nature, our swamps in the middle of the city, and our terrain. So that puts a lot of pressure on the buildable land. So land is very scarce, and therefore basic economic principles, it's going to be more expensive. Infrastructure, when you talk infrastructure, you talk roads, you talk water, you talk electricity, you talk sewage.
Fiber.
Yes. So luckily, again, if you're playing in the affordable housing space, government is happy to hold your hand and cover for you that bill. But because the cost of doing that, even if you're doing affordable or middle or whatever, wherever you're playing, is quite high, and the demands are very, very high in terms of expectations: tarmac roads, walkways, footpaths, cycling lanes, pedestrian lanes, street lighting. We have set the bar so high that, and as we should, that costs. So I've started with land. If it's high, that cost is going to be slapped onto the house. I've come to infrastructure. That cost is going to be added onto the house. Then I come to finance. If you're extremely lucky in our money markets and you're raising project finance to do 100 houses, you'll probably get it at 15%.
Wow.
If you're extremely lucky. So add that cost and the infrastructure cost and the land cost onto the house before you put your profit margin. It ceases to be attractive if you go a little lower down the ladder. And that's why you find most property developers, what will happen is just go to where you can make money. We're not a charity. Uncle Sam is always waiting as well. So you just look for the sweet spot here.
I guess there's a trend that I'm noticing, that rental property managers and owners, I'm seeing them really do two things that I think is very unfair. One, I'm seeing them increase rent almost at a haphazard level, right? So let's say, for example, okay, fine, we have inflation of 5% per year. They're increasing prices at 20, 30, 50%. That's not good. If that's the only thing they did, maybe I'd forgive them. But then now they're also pricing everything in USD. You're starting to see people do that. And I know it's illegal, right? One of the things that, the central bank always says, the Rwandan franc is legal tender here. I have a close relative of mine, who wanted to get a house. And they said, well, you will pay $1,200. And she said, what do you mean dollars? Like it's this. She literally showed the tweet from the governor. And the landlord said, well, if you don't want, you can leave. That's the constant change in rents and the dollars and the dollar increasing, getting strong against the franc is like, I call it like a double whammy for potential renters. As you, I'm not saying that you are one of the perpetrators. That's what I'm saying. But as a person in the industry, I would like to understand why this is happening, whether it's greed or there's something that we don't understand as people who are not in the industry. And is it justifiable? Does it make sense?
I think that there's two issues that you're raising here. One is on the rental rates continuously rising, and then the second is dollarization of rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and the two have something in common, and that's around inflation that you've mentioned. Mm-hmm. So you will find that generally speaking, almost all business people, the way they will cushion themselves against inflation or rising prices will be either to mark up significantly, or to dollarize whatever good or service that they are selling. Because if your product is pegged to the price of the dollar, even if you charge that good or service in Rwandan francs, you find that you're generally cushioned against inflation. And that's a general assumption. But specifically to continuous rise in rentals, there are two things. Number one, generally speaking, we are very informal. I have very many friends and relatives who live in houses without tenancy agreements. And I don't know where this came from. There is an unwritten rule that the notice period that landlords should give tenants is 15 days. And I ask these people, even if it's 15 days, that's not a problem. Get it in writing that it is 15 days. So we are predominantly an informal rental market, especially from a residential perspective. But that is the responsibility of the tenants themselves and even the landlords to protect their own income, that they formalize that relationship. So very many contracts, very many people live in houses without agreements, or even those that have tenancy agreements, they are not well drafted to be able to protect them from some of the ills that you've mentioned, like rental increment. But those who have, and I know many agencies, many landlords, many tenants who have been who are cautious about protecting themselves from such eventualities will insist that the rent will be increased, that there's a clause in the agreements that says you shall not increase the rent in the first year, or rent shall be reviewed every 2 years, or rent shall not increase by 5% every year, or whatever, that it is provided for. So the specific response to that is formalize your relationship with your landlord.
I'd like to ask you a question now. Most of the people who build homes have, unless they have a ton of money in the banks, most of them take mortgages, right? So you'll take a 15-year mortgage, you'll take a 20-year mortgage, and most of the mortgages, as I've learned, are usually fixed at a certain amount of money. So I'll give you an example. When I got married in 2016, we got a house in Kigali, near the Kigali genocide memorial on the lower end. And this was a brand new house, right? So I was the very first tenant. And this is 2016. I paid $400,000, right? And the $400,000 that I paid was good enough for the landlord, right? Because obviously he was not going to rent it to me at a loss, right? He had probably, because I knew he probably had to pay his mortgage.
Agreed, yes.
Yes, and I know, like, it was, I knew what prices were. I was in that house for about 3 years, right? As soon as I left the house, again, he's within the same mortgage, monthly payments. As soon as I left the house price doubled, right? My relative of mine entered that house and it doubled. Today, same house, same mortgage, right? You can't even say that, it's harder for me to pay the mortgage. Same house, same mortgage. It's a 20-year mortgage, so obviously the 20 years have not yet elapsed. He's now saying about $2,000. Now he's even moved from francs. He's now in the $2,000. He's dollarized the whole space. That does not seem even. You talked about inflation and how the people are trying to protect themselves from inflation.
It's not applicable in that case.
No, and I feel like in most cases it is not, right? And it seems it's almost greed at this point. It's not. I don't think you can actually justify it in any real sense.
That may come off as an isolated incident, but it is not. And I can, at the risk of playing devil's advocate for your former landlords, in 2016, the price of fuel was probably 850 francs a liter. The guy's only source of income could be that house. Fast forward today, the price of fuel is approaching 2,000.
Yes.
Right? So many moving parts, bread, sugar, what have you. That's the first reason. The second is property values in Chiwagawaga have risen significantly. And how foolhardy would he be not to want to play
to
in
also
that
enjoy?
game? Yeah. So there are certain market forces that will determine that. But also, remember earlier on we were talking about forces of demand and supply. If the demand for properties in Chiwagawaga is forever increasing, and the supply is not matching,
of course,
naturally the prices will have to go up.
But don't you worry that it's almost we're cutting off our nose, right? Because obviously, yes, at a micro level, it's a good thing for the landlords, but it's causing distortions at every single. I feel like it causes distortions at every single level. If for example my housing is increasing, salaries haven't really changed since then. Right? You see, that's the problem, right? So salaries have really wages have stayed stagnant. And now the pricing of housing, which is one, I'm not talking, you know what, if the housing was built today, then you can say, you know what, there's been inflation since then. There was the Ukraine-Russia war. There's a lot of, you know, what they say about the things that we are importing today. A lot of the things that a lot of the stock is from yesteryear, right? And I'm wondering, okay, the landlords are getting rich off of this, but then they're killing the entire economy, because all of a sudden, whereas before I could maybe spend maybe 20% of my salary, maybe 30% of my salary on housing, and then use the rest to maybe save, buy some clothes, maybe have a beer with my friends. All of a sudden, I'm paying maybe 60% on my housing. And then there's that whole snowball effect to the rest of the economy. Do you guys ever sit down, like, you know, and ask yourselves, okay, yes, it's good for me, but maybe do we not have a level of responsibility?
You see, Sonny,
to not burning down the economy.
Sonny, what usually happens is we are all responsible for the decisions that we make. And I'm going to take you back to the information I shared with you that there's a company in the offing that will be delivering affordable rentals. In most of the municipalities around the world, and even in the region, you'll find that you'll have municipal flats, you'll have entities like national housing or bodies that deliver housing, and it is usually because they want to cushion the market from private developers who are purely driven by profit, and protect a newlywed Sonny from that private developer who is paying a 20% interest, who paid $100 a square meter for land, who is importing all these building materials and paying VAT, withholding tax, import duty, who is paying rental income tax, who is paying corporate income tax, who is paying property tax,
who's paying a bribe to
who is someone going through all these costs to be able to deliver that house, and he has to turn a profit. So government says, you know, to be responsible to our citizens, let us provide an alternative to the people who may not afford this product that has gone onto the market at a very high rate. And it is being done in other sectors. I'll give you an example of transport. You can imagine if public transport was left entirely to private players, would not be able to grab a matatu in this town. Or markets, if markets were food markets, food vendors markets were left entirely to the free market forces of whoever wants to build and run a market, it would not be able to afford a tomato to put on our plate. So the challenge that you're saying, as business people, we don't do business with our hearts. I think that is a space for somebody else. We are profit driven because Uncle Sam as well is always knocking on our doors. I think he even realized, you realized recently that he saw that what he's been collecting is not enough. He's going for the weddings, and I'm told next is the funerals. So the by virtue of the fact that there is an ever growing demand for growth of our economy, and the growth of the economy cannot come from anyone else but us, it means that the businessman will have to be on their toes to continue making money. But that said, I think to expect to call private developers irresponsible or greedy is a little bit unfair. I'll give you another example of public service, public buildings, or government offices. The government, there's a time I looked at a number, and I think it was early 2024, if I recall, or late 2023. And at that time, government had a need of over 25,000 square meters. And they did not have that space. Government buildings are not enough. They go to private owners of buildings and rent space. Quite often, they will negotiate very hard. And not all the time, but sometimes the landlord will accept to take up a government office. We usually joke that is the number one corporate social responsibility that a private developer takes. Yeah. So I think to call private developers greedy might be a bit of an might be a bit aggressive, but there's high levels of responsibility. But I also want to talk to market forces that we are seeing changing, and I'll give you an example of high-end housing. Maybe about 5 years ago, if you are in the market renting a property of $2,000 a month, you would compromise so much on the quality of what you are renting. Today, because that supply has increased, if you're in the market for $2,000, you will get a product that is indeed worth $2,000. And that's because that supply has increased. So I'm just raising an optimistic sound to you, Sunny, that with the supply that is coming on, I think what we are experiencing, I anticipate that what we are experiencing in the high-end income bracket will come down to the middle income space. That might not be tomorrow, maybe in another 6, 7, 8 years. We will see that, to your example of, you said your first home moved from 400,000 to 800,000. So people who are in the market for 800,000, which is a middle income range rent, will be getting better value in the next 7, 8 years. That's my anticipation.
Let's talk about, so you've said that, there are opportunities in the high end sector, and in 5, 6, 7, 10 years, there'll be more supply on the more affordable sector. The thing is, people who are young today, they cannot, I guess, wait for 10 years, right? The person who's, getting married today and wants to step up the property ladder, or someone who's gotten their first well-paying job, right? So maybe they've started, I'm talking about young people, right? Who want to become property owners, not just renters, but property owners. Because I believe, and I'm sure it's everyone's belief, that owning a property very often is the first step on the road to economic prosperity of a person. But with these high property prices that we are seeing in the country, I think that first step is being taken away, for a lot of people. I would like to ask you now, imagine you're talking to someone who is maybe fresh out of college, their very first job, maybe they're earning 500,000, right? They did media or they did law, right? It's a young man, young lady, but they're ambitious. And they want to secure their first property, and not property just for its own sake, but a property that will appreciate, that will give them real value. How would you advise that young person? How should they move? How they identify what is a good investment property? What is not a good investment property? Can you perhaps share some of the tricks of your trade so that they can understand? Because I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I was informed that there was land in Duba. So I go there, I see the property. They said about 40 million. And I was somewhat excited, but I also looked at it. I'm like, okay, we're right below the former dump site. The land is an agricultural, you know how the land use, it's agricultural. But then someone was saying that, Sonny, buy this land, and it's eventually the city will come to that place, and they will have no choice but to change that property into residential, and then you'll make a killing. I personally did not want to do that. It seemed very, very risky, but those are the kind of moves that people have to make, because a young person is not going to find land is not going to buy land in Kimirongo, right? Or Rusororo. That's not happening. They have to buy land in a place that is maybe up and coming, and because they also don't have a lot of money, they can't buy a piece of land and then that land never becomes residential. And now they have a piece of land that's just for farming. So what advice would you give young people? Where should they be looking at based off of you really understanding this real estate space around in the city and even on the outskirts?
First of all, the easiest and softest landing onto the property ladder, if I may say that, is land. Because you can get land as cheap as 1 million francs somewhere. So you can't go wrong with land. So the easiest, and I always tell people, the easiest way to step onto the property ladder is buy land. That's number one. There's also the second thing is there's also a famous real estate adage that in real estate you only make money when you buy.
What do you mean?
It means that, I'll give an example of your Nduba plot that you looked at, and I hope you spent that 14 million francs.
It was 40.
40. Because and I hope you did, but if you did well and good, if you did the deal, if you had not done the deal, you'd be regretting. But if you did the deal, I'm sure a week later, you'd be at 41 million. Right? So the point is that your value increases on almost a daily basis on the land.
Really? Like,
yes,
even if it's land that is agricultural?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Because remember that earlier on we were talking about land being not being elastic. Obviously, there's a caveat. There are circumstances under which the land may not appreciate as fast, and usually those are two reasons. The first is if there's no infrastructure existing or planned in that area. The second reason is if there is no demand at all for that area. If those two are absent, you're doomed. Don't touch that piece of land.
How do you understand? Because, like you said, the person who is, you said, if you have $1 million francs, spend on that. How do you know? Because at the price point of $1 million francs, right? You're not getting a piece of land near a road or already existing urban or semi-urban area. You're kind of going on the unbeaten path. I'll give you an example of my own story. I think it was in 2013. I woke up and decided, you know what, I want to be a landowner. Literally, this is my story. And someone, my motar, told me that there was land in Kinyinya, on the other side of where the green, the green project, the Fonerwa project is. So he shows me the piece of land, yes. And they say it's two small pieces. Together, it will cost you 1.3 million. Obviously, I'm barely out of school. I don't have 1.3 million francs, but I had a job. So I went and took a loan and bought that piece of land. Now, obviously, at that time, there was no master plan for that area, right? This is about 2013, 2012. And I held onto that piece of land. I thought it was where I was going to build my first family home. A few years later, they did the master plan. And guess what was happening in my piece of land?
Tell me.
They had cut a road. I did not know, of course, that next to me was going to be something else, a facility. And they just woke up one day. I remember getting a call maybe in 2017. And I get a call and they say, hey, boss, they've put boundary markings
on your
in the middle on your plot. Oh, my days. I'm like, how did they do this? They didn't call me, nothing. And I just remember thinking, okay, obviously it wasn't that, by the time 2018 reached, I had kind of moved on in my career. It wasn't, that piece of land wasn't my do or die.
But did you lose a whole piece of land?
I mean, most of it, yes. Literally, they took the whole.
Okay, how much are you left with after the roads?
I mean, the plot, because both plot sizes were about 25. It was about 25 by 30.
Okay, 750.
So they took so literally I'm left with a little bit on one side.
Yeah. So you probably lost what, 20%?
Probably I lost more, about 50% of the property.
Okay, that leaves you about 375 square meters.
Yes,
and
I can't
paid
really
1.3.
But then here's my thing.
Yeah,
I was just now thinking like, okay, for me, fine. But imagine
it's not fine because
it wasn't fine. But
you actually, the 375 square meters you're left with could easily be about 40 million francs today.
For real? I need to go and buy. I kind of left it alone because I was like, I'm not going to go and.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that.
Because I was like, you know what? Because I was like, they're building a road for these, let me not argue this case. But what I'm trying to say is, again, I, as a young person, was trying to go off the beaten path. Now, if you're saying that, land can always be, you can always get your money back, but there are these risks. How do you navigate those things? Let's say you have 2 million. If someone was to give you 2 million today and they say, find me a piece of land, I want to be able to build my family home one day, because obviously I'll not be able to rent in this Kigali. Where would you go?
So again, let me just qualify my statement earlier on about land and being able to step onto that property ladder through land. At the beginning of this conversation, we talked about professionals and the importance of talking to the right people. and we're alluding to contracts and rental agreements. In the same breath, when you're buying land anywhere in Kigali, talk to professionals, use the right agents, talk to the right people, consult the master plan. This is not the 2012 when you are acquiring your first land, Sunny. It is 2025 where everything is just a click away, and you can know whether there's a road going through your plot, or you're near a swamp, or the property actually belongs to the person who claims it is theirs, and so on and so forth. So talking to the right people and using the tools that are available on master plan and whatever, they're public documents. That's on the land. The right due diligence, it's just a click away. But in regards to where to invest, and the second point you asked about, when do you know that there will actually be there's demand there? And sometimes we like to say that if you're going to look at a property, and on your way to the property or your way from the property, you haven't met anybody, don't touch that piece of land. You will die of boredom. You will find yourself on an island. And that speaks to the point I was raising around demand. You should be able to see other people going in the same direction as you, or other people coming from where you are going. That will tell you about the demand for where you're going. That's very simple analysis. I think the other one also on where to go, it speaks to that last point I just said just easy eye observation. But Kigali is growing, and areas that were otherwise rural, I said this earlier on, and I'll give you an example like Gasoji. If you just cross the bridge and you're going towards Bugesera, it's becoming a little bit more expensive today. Kanzenze, all the way past Nyamata town, Gahembe, all the peripherals of that, where they have public transport up to 10 p.m. in the night, and so on and so forth. So if you restrict yourself to only the areas that are within your eyesight, you will miss the point. So just be a little bit daring. That's my advice, and move a few kilometers out of Kigali, and then
where would you go?
If I had 2 million francs,
or your younger brother or your cousin says, uncle, older bro, I have 2 million.
If I had 2 million francs, I would look for like-minded people in the same 2 million franc WhatsApp group, team up with about 5 of us, so raise it to 10 million, and I would just go to around in the outskirts of Gasoji, not the nicer part of Gasoji, the outskirts of Bumbogo, around there, and pick something nice there. Are those pieces of land still there? 10 million? Yeah, you definitely can get 10 million in some of those areas. Just a little bit out of Nduva. A little problem with us sometimes when you think of Bumbogo, we think about ALU, but you just move. You know, the example you gave about the backside of Green City, Kigali. If you look at the backside of Chinyinya or the backside of Nduva or the Bugesera facing Gahanga, those, or the other side of Ndera facing the Eastern Province, or the other side of Masaka again facing the Eastern Province, you still can get some affordable pieces that side. Yeah,
I mean, most people that I know don't have 5, 10, 20 million francs in their bank accounts to buy a property. If they want to buy a property, very often they will probably go to a commercial bank, take out usually it's a personal loan. And if they're lucky, the personal loan will be around 16%. If they're unlucky, it will be 18%. Now, I want you to help me understand, right? Because sometimes pain today is the only pain you feel. So if, say, I've taken 20 million francs at 18%, and now I've bought a property, and I have to pay that rate for 5 years, 6 years. I'd like to know, looking at property values, like what you know, does it make sense to go to the bank, take out, say, a personal loan at a rate of, say, 18% to buy a property, to buy a piece of land? Is there, or is it not really a good idea?
First of all, first home owners can get mortgages from as low as 11%. We have an affordable housing mortgage scheme that allows people to take mortgages for as low as 11%. That is number one. Secondly, and I'll
let's say it's not first home owners. It's someone who is maybe already owns a home, but sees, like I said, like that deal, 50 million, someplace in Nduba. They don't really have the cash. They probably have children's school fees. They have their own mortgage or the rent, lifestyle. So to be able to afford that property, they have to go and take a commercial loan or a personal loan. Now, we know the rates. Does it make sense to do that?
Quite often it does, but not all the time. And I will tell you where it does make sense. It makes sense on average in Kigali, property appreciates at about 20 to 25% per annum.
Per year?
Per year. So if you're paying an interest of about 18% and your property is appreciating at 25% per year, that means you already have 7% gain on the value. And
is that any property in Kigali?
Or is it quite often it's a lot more than that. Sometimes it's more. You have property in some areas. You have property that appreciates at 100%. I mean, just give an example of your Kinyenya land and the values I've just given you.
Yeah. I'm actually after this, I would like you to perhaps visit it and maybe help me sell that piece of property.
Yeah. So the number one, it may sound very sophisticated for certain people that you're looking at appreciation, and just to break it down in very, very simple terms, it means what is the value of your land today compared to what the value was last year. If it is higher than your interest rate in the bank, rush to your bank and take the loan. But I also want to talk something about how to step on the property ladder, and there's some schemes. There's what we call lease to own or tenant purchase scheme, depending on where you come from. They have been done in Rwanda before, with the most recent one, even though it's not very recent, the Vision 2020 estate by RSSB. There was a defunct institution called Kesi Poteke that did another scheme in Nyamirambo, another one in Kachiru, and I am privy to information that the government of Rwanda is coming up with another scheme for tenant purchase, or lease to own. It basically works in a very, very simple way, that you pay rent for a period of time that can be 10, 15, 20 years. And after that period, the property becomes yours.
So how's that different from a mortgage?
It's very, very different because the calculation of your monthly repayment is what you would have otherwise paid in rent. Right? So whereas the calculation of the mortgage is purely dependent on how much you have borrowed. So they would do houses of 50 million francs as an example, get people to pay 250,000 francs a month in in monthly repayments as rent, because that's the amount of rent they have been paying anyway. So there's that's the number one difference. So the lease to own or tenant purchase schemes are really pegged onto how much rent you'd have otherwise been paying anyway. The second major difference is that you find that the cost of finance for whoever is doing the houses is a lot lower than an ordinary developer who was going to borrow at 15, 16, 20% to deliver the houses. So that's something really exciting coming on board, just for the viewers and the people watching the long form to say, watch this space.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to sound xenophobic, because that's really not what I'm trying to do. I'm a huge user of Twitter, and my Twitter algorithm is not just Rwanda. So it's a bit of Rwanda, it's a bit of Uganda and Congo. So one of the interesting conversations that I'm starting to see on Ugandan Twitter is the influence of different communities in the Kampala real estate market. Now, before I came to Rwanda in late 1994, December, I used to live in a place called Kansanga. You are a Uganda boy, so you also know where Kansanga would be. Now, that was a place that was very middle income. It was kind of a nicer neighborhood. There wasn't too much going on, but it was a nice place to kind of raise a family. Now, fast forward to today, I'm starting to see a lot of conversation around the fact that because of the influx of people from the Horn of Africa, they've started calling that place kind of I think it's like Little Asmara. Like it's a lot of Tigrayans and they've come in and just bought out, the local property owners, right? They come in, they say, hey, you've been renting to these Ugandans at this. We'll give you triple what you are getting from them, and obviously they will make a business decision. As you said earlier, you guys are not in the industry of charity. You're trying to make money. And so this whole neighborhood has taken a certain flavor, which is okay, right? When you think about the economics of it makes sense, right? It's demand and supply. The property owners have made money. The people who need properties are happy. But the conversations that I'm starting to hear, I'm trying to watch and read, is our country is being taken away from us. Something needs to be done. They're asking the government, please help us out here. We're being priced out. They're kicking us out. Our contracts with landlords are not being followed because the landlords are being given deals that they cannot say no to. Now, that is what's happening there. I'm pretty sure if you're to go to Nairobi, it's the same, right? Whereas normal people used to maybe live in South Sea. In Nairobi, it's become something else. Now, Rwanda for the longest time always kind of felt that it felt that we were really at the periphery of all that, We didn't really have a huge, foreign population. There were little pockets, maybe a few NGOs taking a few houses in Kiyovu. It was usually Kiyovu. Things have changed, right? We're no longer at the periphery, whether it is how we've grown our country, whether it's Visit Rwanda, whether it's RDB really doing its job to attract investment. Things have changed. You're starting to see Turks, Sudanese, Nigerians, Americans, Chinese. They're coming, and they're not just coming to rent. They are coming to buy. They're really being a part and parcel of our communities. As Sunny, I think that's great. Again, I don't want to sound xenophobic, but they are coming with their wealth, right? So we have our GDP per capita, right? In Rwanda, it's slightly over $1,000. They're coming from, say, China, where their GDP might be 13,000. They're coming from Turkey, where their GDP might be 36,000. They're coming from Nigeria, where, well, I'm not going to say much about the Nigerian GDP per capita, but it's the ones who are coming have a little bit of money. There is an effect in this, right? Again, you guys are probably laughing all the way to the bank. You're saying, okay, it's our time now. But there's an effect on the market. Now, they're coming with money and their lifestyle expectations, right? So if someone's coming here, I was living in Lagos. There was a fantastic golf club. That's what they'll demand. And because there's suddenly a market for it, there'll be a golf club. Those things do something to the market, right? Because, we're close to the golf club right now. House prices around the old golf club versus the house prices around this new golf club, totally different. Now, when you think about all these, their incomes and their expectations, what do you think is the long-term impact of that in our property market? And how will it affect locals beyond just the most basic things that, like beyond just saying, oh, well, prices just might rise? What are the long-term effects of it? Is it something that we should actually be worried about?
Well, look here, Sunny.
And the last question, is there a worry? Do you worry at some level that we might end up being priced out of the nicest places in our own country?
No, not at all. Look here, Sunny. First of all, there's something for everybody in this town. Under no circumstances should we view Kigali, the whole of Kigali, with a Nyarutarama lens. Because Kigali is way more than Nyarutarama and Gachuri and Kagugu. That's the first point. So, and the first point being there's something for everybody. The second point being that the affluent areas are less than 2% representation of the entire Kigali. But I also want to tell you that the property developers that we have in our market are Rwandese, Chinese, Eritreans, Indians, and people from but predominantly Rwandese, Chinese, Eritreans are the ones controlling the market, and then the others fill the gaps. But the amount of and the volume of real estate that Rwandese property developers are doing is easily about 90% of the volume in the market. So let's not be deceived by the pockets of developments that we are seeing by the other foreign developers. But also, in addition to that, Sunny, you will be pleasantly surprised that Rwandese property developers quite often pay more than foreign property developers.
What do you mean?
So in the event, and I'll give you an example of Kibagabaga. If you go to Kibagabaga, there's quite a few developments coming up. And easily, some of those that are being done by Rwandese property developers, local property developers, they don't mind paying $200 a square meter for land. Whereas here in Nyarutarama, you have foreign property developers who want to pay a maximum of $150 a square meter. So you see, in a place that is less affluent, local developers are paying more than here in a place that is more affluent. So I am not worried at all about the players, because foreign players, because we badly need them to be able to narrow the gap. And at the risk of repeating myself, we have seasoned local developers who are happy to pay that top dollar in land values because of what they are able to do with that land.
Yeah, I wasn't really talking about the developers. I think, again, I would be the first one to say that we should have as many developers as possible because that will create more supply. I'm talking about there's already as you said rightly, there is already a shortage. Now we're also having more people coming from outside to also who want to live and work here in Kigali. And I'm just asking you, what do you see will be the long-term effect of the increased population of people who are coming to also consume on the very limited supply?
Yeah, I think the more the merrier, because it will push us to deliver more houses. If the rental pool is wider, it will be a fantastic thing. And I like to give an example, and that's a very important conversation to have, because we were used to seeing the expatriate community predominantly interested in staying in Chimihura,
yes,
Chiovu.
Now they're everywhere.
Now they're going to Chimirongo, they're going to Nyamirambo, they're going to these other suburbs. But they're not outpricing the rentals in those areas. They are paying the same amount of rentals that the locals would have otherwise been paying. But the good news is that they have allowed the people who own properties in those suburbs to build more, because all of a sudden the demand for those kind of rentals in Chimirongo and Nyamirambo and not has gone beyond only the local population to even other foreigners living with us here. So I think it's a very good problem to have, Sunny. I'm not worried at all about it. However, that said, I think one of the beauties that Kigali City has done, and kudos to I think, like you and I should be smoking some of what the guys at the city of Kigali are smoking. Tarmac roads in this city of ours used to be a myth. Today, literally everywhere you go, there's a tarmac road. What has that done for the real estate market is that it's opened up areas that were otherwise unpleasant to live in. And the conversation started around rentals and you squeezing yourself in Kibagabaga because that's probably the only area where you would afford 400,000 francs, because that's also probably the only area where there was a tarmac road. Today, just pay that the same amount of money, go to Chichichiro Mayanje, and you have a bigger, better house. And it will still take you the same amount of time it used to take you those days to get to Kibagabaga. So I had said earlier on that there's something for everyone. There's something for everyone in this market. Kigali is hustling and bustling with demand for real estate. It's a very good time to be in the market. Yes,
I guess, and there's that worry of gentrification, right? Where, okay, so Sunny used to be able to afford, and the old Sunny, right? So Sunny, he was able to afford Kiwagawaga, 400K. And that's, again, wages have not really shifted since then. Now, let's say because of the influx, prices of rent have increased. Maybe Sunny's household staff was maybe living in a smaller place, maybe in Kimironko somewhere. And they were paying maybe 20,000 or 30,000. Now what's happening is Sunny cannot afford Kiwagawaga, so he goes to where
his house helps are working. Was
staying. Because that's all of a sudden, that's where I can afford. But very often what's going to happen is, it's not that I'm not going to pay the 20,000. No. The entire market has changed because it's not one thing that, no, everything increases. It's not that Kiovu becomes expensive and then Nyamirambo,
and the city of Kigali is not selective on where they do the tarmac roads. They put them everywhere. Yes,
exactly. So all of a sudden, the place that was cheap has now become expensive, and then the people who are living in a cheap place, well, they have to live somewhere. They can't stay there. So it's kind of like almost a snowball effect. Now, that's maybe where I'm kind of worried, is that we might end up changing, the face of our city.
That has been carefully thought about, and earlier on I joked about smoking what the guys at City of Kigali smoke. They have come up with a very beautiful concept called rehousing, where you do not move informal settlers out of what is informal around them.
So no longer Banyahe issues.
Yes, exactly. And there's a scheme that's been tried and tested and very successfully implemented in an area called Mazi. That's somewhere between Chimisagara.
What happened there?
So what they did is that these people had shanty informal houses.
Where is Mazi? In Kigali?
Yes, it's in Kigali. It's an area that connects from Nyabugogo towards Chimisagara, that side. I think the Murenje is called Kigali. So they get people who live there. They don't move them away. They build for them more densified housing. So assuming you had 400 square meters, and there were only 2 families living on those 400 square meters, they would build vertically maybe 10 homes for ease of numbers and put 10 people on that 400 square meter plot, and then the rest of the land is available for development. That's being done. It's been done very well in Mazi, and you're going to have people who would walk to Serena because they are cleaners at Serena or Seashuka or anywhere around town. All that volume of work that is there, they don't have to move away because where they were staying is where they are still staying, but this time in more decent housing.
Yes. So people are no longer being told
to move away. No. It's being done as well in Nyabisindu, which is that area that connects Chivagawaga to that part of Chimirongo, and there's that type. And then yesterday I had a new word, a new name for this village that's called the Mango Village, which is in Chimirongo.
Miembe.
Yes, I really love that. And that's also the what's going to happen there around that rehousing. So I think that's a very brilliant thing, and to come in to address the challenge, the fear that you have just mentioned around moving people away from where their livelihoods are.
I think that's a very important conversation to have, and I'm really happy that our government is having these conversations. Now, I'd like to maybe think about the future of Kigali, right? So, every so often, and this is my last question to you, every so often I'll stand on my balcony and kind of look out the city. I look around the city and say, oh my goodness, this is nothing like what I was raised in, right? Sometimes, you do this and there's the KCC, then you do over here. It's a 45,000 seater Stade Amahoro. There's the ambition to have F1. Now, you as the person in the property market, you must be licking your chops and saying, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be an amazing decade to come." Is that how you feel?
It's still a long way. I think some of the major issues that we still need to resolve are cost of finance. Money is very expensive. Cost of borrowing is quite high. For us to be able to achieve those milestones to reduce that the number of informal settlements that we have, for us to improve the ISO, and I mean, when you look at some of the views that we say, we like to joke that Kigali's views are very nice in the night because it's all lit. But in the day, it can be a little bit of an eyesore on almost all parts of Kigali. So we still have a long way to go. We should not be able to relax, but we look at it from an opportunity perspective that whatever looks shanty, whatever looks informal, that is located in prime areas is an opportunity to be able to develop the land. So yes, it's exciting times to be in the market, and we wouldn't like to be. We are happy that we're in Kigali, that there is still good pieces of land to develop. Yes.
Last word from you. If there was one message that people should take from this podcast, one message, one thing that they take away, what should that be?
Time to buy is yesterday.
No truer words spoken. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Pleasure was mine, Sunny. Thanks
having you. And I think, like I said, after this, I really want us to discuss my little piece of land that I kind of pretty much abandoned.
Yeah.
There might be some money to be made.
It's a saving.
Amazing.
It's money in the bank.
Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you for
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, truly enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the very end. I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation. So drop a comment below and join the discussion. You can also join us on the social media of your choice. And if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend and invite them to the conversation. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care.